Well refreshed, everyone, I hope? For everyone's FYI, the defense has agreed to defer their cross-examinations for the moment, so we can get on with the witnesses we have and ask them to help create the best picture. Your next witness?
Our next witness, Your Honor, and we thank counsel for giving us priority, is Professor Frank Korngold. Professor Korngold, please. Professor Korngold, we asked you to jump in here ahead of schedule because it seems that you are best possible to fill us in on some of the background.
Well, it's quite all right. I'll do the best that I can.
Just talk to us, Professor. We probably wouldn't know where to start.
Well, in a way, neither do I. You may know that I teach at both MIT and TUM, and that I have assistants in charge of my communication at both places, Boston and Munich. And that sometimes that doesn't work perfectly so. I almost did not receive the request to propose a redesign of the Tower Hotel in Manhattan. At first, I respectfully declined, as they say. Sustainable design is what I do and what I teach, not luxury at any cost. Then they came at me with but sustainability is what we want, at which point I said, okay, I'll take a look. Can you send me some data? Which they did. It still did not make a lot of sense, however. I didn't think what they wanted was a windmill on top of a tower, rang, 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 rang. You know, with all due respect. Sorry about that, but what should I expect? Sudden sustainability, or use my name and reputation as a publicity fix? Anyway, then they were suddenly in a great rush and asked me to come inspect the place. So I said, maybe next time I'm in Cambridge, I'll shuttle to New York and look at what you have, look at what there is, and how it could possibly be made to be or even look sustainable, given the benefit of the doubt, you know. Next thing I know, about 6 weeks later, when I get to my place in Cambridge and I'm just ready to sleep off the 6-hour jet lag, a very friendly young woman knocks at my door and gives me the kind regards, the president, and asks if I could not drive with her to New York, pointing at some kind of a town car parked at the end of the cul-de-sac. After the weekend, I suggest, but she says, how about now? I see you haven't even unpacked, and the president has an event scheduled there late tomorrow morning. You can sleep on the way. The young lady apparently saw my phone on the table and reminded me, you have to take your phone with you, you know. Perhaps I was just too jet lagged to say no firmly enough, so I ended up sleeping in her luxury town car. I was really out.
And then what happened? You just spent the night in one of the luxury suites and had a meeting in the morning?
I wish. When I got there in the early evening, and yes, you were right, they put me up in some tolerably nice suite. I had just got in a couple of hours snooze when my phone started jumping all over the nightstand. I had put it on vibrate instead of turning it off. Anyway, there's this tweet asking me to meet him at 9 p.m. all the way up in the penthouse. So I got myself straightened out and took the elevator up, but I couldn't get out because a couple of goons frisked me. When I finally got into the place, I don't need to describe it, do I? So he, the president, gets up from whatever there was in front of him on a sort of dining table. He comes towards me, outstretched hand, which I didn't take, so he patted me on the shoulder instead. "You're my guy, Frank," he says. "I need your help." I couldn't help myself and just said, "Professor Korngold, nice to meet you, Mr. President." Other people say, "An honor to meet you," but it's okay. Sit down, Frank. Not worth bickering, is it? They told me, you're the guy who can fix things for me. You're tremendously famous, they said. Household name like. Like if I told the people Korngold says this or Korngold says that, they'd believe it, right? You can become well, we'll take care of you later. I'll tell my people. First, you'll take care of me, right? Make me look like the king of sustainability. And how do you suggest I do that, sir? Well, that's your job. We talked and you make it happen, right? Then he got up and shooed me to the door, past a room full of pictures that I could take in, all of them of him, I assume. And he said, see you tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Be a sport. Especially when you do that on Jeff. So I did get to sleep some of it off, but at 8 a.m. or something like that, I got a tweet saying, we need a statement from you. What statement, I thought, but I just responded, I need breakfast. That may have been a mistake. I did get my breakfast, but with it came a note. It was written by someone with a very tight, strained handwriting. To this day, I don't know who actually wrote it, but it did get my attention. What it said was, he wants a statement. That's what you're here for. Meeting, 10 a.m. upstairs. Now, I've done a lot of statements in my career. It's part of the job, but there was nothing I could say. So I had to figure out how to say something that said nothing. Well, I started something like very honored and looking forward stuff and added a little, especially in these times, and then called it a rewarding, ongoing project. And that may have been my second mistake. When I got upstairs at 10 o'clock, he came towards me irate. Why call it ongoing? He wanted to know nothing about the fact that I had no valid data to assess anything. He simply waved it off. When I asked if he wanted me to leave out the word ongoing, he got even more mad. I don't want a project either, Frank. A project takes time, and I don't have time. You're a great disappointment, Frank. I thought I could depend on you. I should have found myself somebody taller, I guess. Not such a half midget like you. Half midget. Are you even a real American? I remember that tirade practically verbatim. And that is when I got up and started to leave.
Excuse me, I got lost somewhere here. You are now where?
I'm up at the office floor, halfway up, not the penthouse. Still a failed jump, you might say. Anyway, when I started to turn around to leave, his voice became sort of threatening. You leave, you don't come back. What he didn't seem to realize was I didn't want to come back anything but. I'm sorry, Mr. President, I cannot help you. Not the way you want to be helped, I said. And then I felt a little bit cocky, you might say, and added, and I'm an architect, not a PR hack. And I left. Behind me, I felt something like, I took a slow elevator to get my stuff out of my suite and find some way back to Cambridge. By the time I had my bag and was on my way down to the lobby, the place suddenly felt like enemy territory. I walked towards the outside side doors when I saw him come down the escalator, talking loudly to someone on the phone, something like, I don't need you here for this, go back to your office. And I literally ducked back into a hallway, at least for a minute. Meanwhile, I tried to phone the nice young lady who had carted me there, but there was only a message. Obviously, I was at a favor and was supposed to walk home, so to speak. I finally managed to sneak out the side door when I witnessed it all happen. He walked outside through the front door. He reached into his right coat pocket and he pulled out a gun, a pistol. He pointed it across the street and tried to pull the trigger, but nothing happened. It's almost like he was saying bang, bang. So that moment actually created a false sense of safety because we got the impression of a sort of make-believe toy thing. But he continued fumbling around and somehow took off the safety. That's when he saw me and pointed the gun at me, screaming, "You're a fraud, Frank! Frank the fraud! Frank the fraud! You're fired!" Or maybe he said that a few seconds later. Anyway, then he called me a loser. No good deed shall go unpunished. I had just tried to help, or maybe there was a bit of vanity in it, too, being called by the president, you know. But what happened next happened so fast, it takes a slow motion kind of mental reconstructing to even describe it. When I sneaked out from behind the glass panel, I saw that some Secret Service people seemed to be moving in closer, slow motion, trying to contain the situation. That's when the president suddenly turned and started screaming something at the press people there. He pointed the gun at them, and they moved back step by step until one of them stumbled with his tripod and camera, and that's when he shot straight at the one reporter, still screaming something, but it was in the opposite direction, and I really couldn't hear it. The reporter collapsed, and the people next to him caught him. It was all so unreal. And then he shot at one of the Secret Service people, the defendant. I think it was at that point they were all moving in very quickly, really very fast compared to before. Then the defendant shot back to disable him. Really?
If I may, Professor Korngold, could I ask you a non-architectural question, if the defense has no problem with it?
Unseen? We can't say. But ask anyway, and we'll tell you.
Same here.
In your non-professional, let's call it sense of things, I'm specifically not calling it an assessment. Could the defendant or any of the Secret Service people around him possibly have acted or reacted differently?
Again, prefacing this as having happened extremely rapidly and me not having slow motion footage, it really has to be my gut sense, okay? And my gut sense says no. They could not have acted differently. They even tried to de-escalate, which is not their job. Actually, I was surprised that no one shot any earlier, all with their guns ready. They waited 5 shots, one of them fatal. So that's my 5 cents worth.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Your Honor, the defense would like to cross the witness briefly while we're at the subject of gut sense.
I said it before. I'll stop if it goes off.
If it's okay with you, Professor Korngold, you described the president's actions and the behavioral progression so intensely, obviously because you were very much affected by it.
No. No leading psychiatric assumptions.
Sorry, let me rephrase. Your description of the events was so detailed and so vivid that it is hard to believe that you had or have no sense of what the president's actions and the behavioral progression signified.
I'm not a psychiatrist. I can only tell you my feelings and how they possibly can be seen as a valid reflection of what happened, okay? The bottom line is this. I felt creeped out. I guess I'm choosing this colloquialism because it best summarizes the fact that I experienced, and I emphasize I experienced about everything relating to the man's behavior as pathological. Something that would make you feel uneasy and afraid. I could also say, pardon me, that's what they have rubber walls and straitjackets for. There seemed no sense of reality behind his words and his actions. Maybe I haven't answered your question, counsel, about what it signifies. It signifies someone who has irretrievably lost it, and he should have been locked up before he shot at me, before he killed the reporter, and before he got killed himself. Period.
Plainly spoken, but thank you. Thank you, Professor Korngold. Your Honor, since we raised no objection to the prosecution's creative handling of witnesses, may we make a request? Since your previous witness provided us with such an in-depth reflection of the president's, let's call it personal crisis leading up to the events, could we please recall Melody Price?
Are you all right, Miss Price? This may be a bit sudden for you, but maybe you're up for it?
I guess so. It depends on what you want from me.
Miss Price, you heard Professor Korngold and how he, as an outsider, experienced his hours leading up to the shots fired at him and others. You have a different vantage point from which you experienced everything, and that is where we would like to go now. Is that okay with you? Okay, then.
I was always a little afraid of him, but I didn't think much about it. Sometimes I thought that it was because he was so much into women and that he wasn't interested in me. Strange, come to think of it. Perhaps if he had been interested, it would have given me a sense of being in charge, you know, but this way I was only a wheel in the works, something no one cares about, an exchangeable mole. No glamour, only the stress atmosphere, which was all over the place all the time, except for a few insiders, senior advisors. Everybody was walking on eggshells. It was an emotional minefield, like the man. I sometimes was thinking to myself that everyone who got fired probably was breathing a sigh of relief and got off antidepressants. I had my 2 cats at home. They're my antidepressants. Now, you may be asking yourself why I was doing that job.
I wasn't going to, but it sure might be enlightening.
Originally my boyfriend then, he wanted a prestige job to impress his grandparents, big money. And when he didn't land one, he sent me, "You're a good-looking girl," and so on. He never thought I was getting anywhere because I'm smart. That's how I got into the job. They hired me first as a copy girl, so to speak. And then as the ranks spinned rapidly, I ended up coordinating. Make that trying to coordinate communications. The interesting thing I learned about is that communications is always an issue of trying to look like, trying to make something sound like. And because I was just the little copy girl, nobody really tried very hard to pretend in front of me. A little like masters undressing in front of slaves, because slaves aren't real people. Really a strange couple of days. Remember, there was no press release because the architect didn't give them anything. I didn't know what they expected. Then they got pissed at me because I said I have no idea what to make up. That's the press secretary. My job is to coordinate, not to make it up. Then I heard about the run-in they had, and on the office floor, then I got a strange call from the White House. Actually, I didn't know if it really was. Just seemed like one of the 3 at the top, that I should do something, and then the line crashed. That was about 10 a.m. on the day of the shooting. So I went up to the office floor to see what I could do, but the Secret Service people wouldn't let me in. Emergency meeting or something like that. I was really absolutely, totally helpless, let alone doing my job. That's when I saw Professor Korngold leave. He looked shocked and bewildered.
Two questions. Was the defendant among the Secret Service people in front of the office? And secondly, did you see anyone else come out of or enter the office suite?
No to both. First, to my knowledge, the people at the 26th floor were his. So Anthony Kyle was not among them. Those on the street are local, or like the defendant, assigned Secret Service people. If anyone else entered or left, not that I know, except for myself, but of course, I didn't get in. If the defendant had been upstairs, I think I would have received a better answer. Or maybe not, because nobody seemed to know everything. Utter chaos. The strange thing was that throughout that morning, I had the sense that the president was conferring with someone, rather constantly. I can't tell you more because it was just a feeling.
Thank you, Ms. Price. And if it's okay with everyone, we would like to call Timothy Meyers. Thank you, Mr. Meyers. First, let me clarify that you were not present at the scene. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But you are a colleague of the accused?
Yes, ma'am.
And you worked with him regularly. You know his habits, at least around the job. Is that correct?
You could say that.
How long have you known him?
Oh, man. We go way back. A long way.
You know John Dudley?
Not really, no. I know of him.
Ever met him?
A few times. At social occasions, but don't remember ever really talking to him.
When you say going back a long time, what did you mean?
15, 20 years. From back in the training centers. It's changed a bit since different training, I think. Better money.
What's special about him? I don't mean to embarrass him, but...
Tony? No. We called him the philosopher. You wouldn't expect it from a buff guy like him. Always thinking, always asking questions. The what if kind. And if you got lost, he's always there. Tony is not a simple man, you could say. It's a tough job in a way. Major stress. There's a lot of waiting and routine stuff, but you're always ready. And it may never happen. And sometimes it does. Sometimes it feels like a wound clock that can't run. If you can't make it and go under in stress.
How do you deal with the stress, Mr. Meyers?
Me? I have a life outside the job. I paint. Sometimes even good stuff. It's that kind of relationship you have with what you see and what you paint and how you paint it. My wife always sends me to the porch. That's where I paint. She knows how I feel before I do.
What do you know about how Anthony Kyle was or is dealing with stress? As you said, always thinking, and thinking isn't necessarily the best stress medicine.
Good question, ma'am. A real good question. Or should I not call you ma'am? Seems disrespectful to just say yes or no.
No problem, Mr. Meyers.
Maybe I like to come off simple. Anyway, maybe better ask him. What I know is that he hikes a lot with his new lady and their shaggy old dog. Or maybe not such an old dog, just looks old. I think he's totally not into all the stuff people get to make themselves feel good. Just like I said, a philosopher. I like him, and I trust him. And I'm so sorry he has to go through this.
Mr. Meyers.
Yes?
Mr. Meyers, you are an active Secret Service officer and you are under oath.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Just like the president.
I hate to ask that, but would you rate your oath higher than your friendship with Anthony Kyle?
I have to. But I have to tell you something. I don't see any situation where Tony would expect me to violate my oath to help him. It's his oath too, you know. And we would also tell each other when we feel one of us is in trouble. We have each other's back. You know, if we cannot trust each other 1,000%, we're in the wrong job. As simple as that.
Let me ask another question, one that you may be best qualified to answer of all our witnesses. Did you see the footage of the attack?
Yes, I did.
And based on what you saw and based on your professional assessment, you and Mr. Kyle both are trainers as well, right? Do you see any way that defendant could have acted any different from how he did act?
No. Frankly, I think someone said it before. I was surprised how long they all waited before taking action. But then, Jesus Christ, none of us is trained to shoot the president. To protect and serve and lay down our life on the line for the president, not shoot the guy. We're not trained for that. We don't even know how to think that. Can I add something here? Maybe it's not my place to say that, but I just don't see how this whole thing being about Anthony Kyle. To me, it's about a whole world that has gone so insane that something like this could even happen. It's about how many tens of thousands of millions of people look the other way while this kind of insanity is growing like all this, like a or whatever. And they don't care as long as their interests are served. And I mean anything, from their little family or neighborhood satisfaction to those greedy trillionaires who want to own the whole world and don't care how. And mind you, I don't think this is about politics. It's about people's integrity. That's why I said what I said about my oath is also Tony's oath. We are really inseparable. And people should be inseparable. Sorry.
Your Honor, may we call Eve Mattler to the stand? Ms. Mattler is the widow of the late Greg Mattler, who was killed by the president on the day of the events at issue here.
I must admit I'm not sure of the significance, but I also must admit that for whatever reason I feel a strong hesitation to deny your request.
Ms. Mattler, would you please come forward to the witness box? Ms. Mattler, thank you for living through this with us. I can imagine this is not easy. Even more so, please accept our thanks.
Your Honor, and everyone here, to be honest, I'm not sure what I should say or what you expect me to say or what you would not want me to say. But I am here. And I was listening to all the testimony, as hard as it was at times, because I feel that it could give me a sense of closure. You're witnessing what happened to my husband, how he died. That could give me closure and allow me to move on. The wonderful thing is that my husband died the way I knew him. There was no other side of him, and it leaves me encouraged to be as total as he was. Why did he have to die? Why did he have to die? I'm asking this question because he shared with me the vision to look for and find the sense in everything. He said that his job as a reporter was about that, basically, to look for and find reality and the sense of it. That's why I'm asking. You know, he also lived on the conviction that life is generous, not that first you suffer and then you die stuff. Like life had those open arms for us. And we trust it and receive. A view of life as very maternal, you could say. This is another thing we shared. He wanted to be part of being a family. He demanded part-time from his bosses, and he got it. Now he has full-time, and I don't mean that cynical. Maybe he died in a kind of nutshell, that small space in the universe where his search for reality collided with the other guy's war against reality. I've been thinking about that a lot, and that's why it's coming out so complicated. To say it simple, there he was, the man dedicated to facts, and there he was, the man who could not coexist with facts and reality. And my husband had only a notepad. The other guy had a gun. Almost a kind of Western flavor to it, doesn't it? Maybe somebody's going to do a painting of that someday. I really feel this whole thing needs to be condensed into one medium at a time. What I got from the testimony is an understanding of how complicated and heavy, really heavy, these structures are around lies. It's like a kind of sci-fi glue on your feet. You can barely move forward. Perhaps I should write about that. I'm not going to be a PhD, though.
Miss Mattler, if I may interrupt here, I do understand where you're coming from. Maybe I do, maybe I don't, but I think I should remind you that this proceeding is about the charges against Mr. Kyle. Testimony, all testimony, including yours, serves only one purpose: to help the jury to determine his guilt or innocence. So please, keep your testimony within these boundaries. Perhaps I should ask counsel to guide you somewhat by way of questions.
We will do that, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor, we will. Miss Mattler, the reason we called you, to the extent that we knew at the time, was that you might shed some light on your late husband's ongoing work projects. And the reason we wanted to pursue that is that there is a reason to believe that your late husband and the defendant have had some communications in the past. What we'd like to determine, beyond the documents we have been able to submit in discovery, is to what extent your husband's prior reporting could have influenced the defendant one way or the other.
I never met the defendant, if that's what you're asking. And I also don't really know if my husband and the defendant ever met in person.
Would this mean that the documents we have tell the whole story?
No, they won't. He told me that he was trying to learn something about the inner workings of the relationship strict military people surrounding a man like the late president have to the subject they are guarding. Or, to put differently, what in terms of adherence to an oath is required from someone like Secret Service people when the person they have sworn to protect is the kind of person the late president was, and especially when it was so blatant a character acting out.
How do you mean that?
Well, it's simple in a way. Imagine your job, more than a job really, is to protect a person, and you're around that person very frequently and very closely, and you witness all that person's behavior, good, bad, or indifferent. How do you deal with a sense of judgment, especially when your approach to the job is one of total integrity? That's what my husband wanted to know, he said, and that's why he approached people like Anthony Kyle, the defendant. I can't give you a minute account of what they communicated about and how. I can only give you a flavor. My husband was astonished and awed, he said, at the degree of dedication he encountered in his contacts with a few of them. A few of them, not all, of course. But you get a sense of a possible scope. And I had a sense that he felt encouraged that in such sensitive situations, there were people of such integrity. So this is maybe where the relevance comes in of what I'm telling you. The sense that I got from his contacts, my husband's contacts, was that these people are as straight as in a sappy movie. It's a high-stress job, he also found out, that there is the constant alertness, and at the same time, you can't get paranoid, can't get bored, or lulled, or numb, and never act or react outside of your assignment. This is why I'm glad I can connect these dots for you, because between my husband and his unofficial research, that was what his ultimate goal was. I'm not sure about. But he often spoke of the potential role of military-type obedience in obstructing or helping progress. What he meant was about how taking well-qualified and well-paid people and dehumanizing them by way of a hierarchical job could possibly end up perpetrating and perpetuating a dehumanizing state. He often told me of the Nuremberg trials and their standard defense. I only did what I was told. That is what my husband was. You could almost say obsessed with. He said, that separation of duty from consciousness and ethics is impossible. That it always takes a decision to look away, to hold your nose, so to speak, or to drink the Kool-Aid and embrace a dehumanizing or criminal or unethical objective. It's easy, he said, and it comes dressed in all kinds of seemingly harmless outfits. That's tough. He was tough. That's perhaps what attracted him to the Secret Service people and their tough objectives.
Honor, if I may.
You may. Excuse the interruption, Miss Mattler.
We would like to understand the ultimate purpose of Miss Mattler's testimony, Your Honor. Our impression to this point is that she serves as yet another character witness for the defendant. Is that correct, counsel?
You may have a point there, Miss Wynn. Perhaps we should categorize it as such. Based on the 2 counts of the indictment to establish the defendant's impeccable and reflected ethics, yes, that serves as character testimony.
The thin line between character and sainthood.
Excuse me?
Sorry about that, Your Honor, but this has been a very unusual proceeding, and I really question, with all due respect, the validity of some second-hand philosophizing as character testimony. We cannot ask the late Greg Mattler if his widow's account is accurate.
A little tasteless there. It wasn't necessary.
Please proceed. Ms. Mattler, please stay on point.
Can I answer the accusation? If there were anything you could point out to me about any advantage I could possibly have from telling you what I told you, I would say, okay, let me consider that. But there is nothing, actually. My husband's work, as I experienced, it was very critical. You tell me any case where a reference to Nuremberg is made in any soft peddling context. I don't know. Maybe I am done. You get it or you don't.
Do you want to excuse the witness?
I think yes, Miss Mattler. For now, please don't run away. We very much thank you for your testimony. Your husband would be extremely proud of you. He could not wish for a better widow. It sounds wrong to say it that way. I'm convinced of that. I feel it in my gut, though. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I beg your pardon, Your Honor. I don't remember the government having abdicated its entitlement to cross the witness.
Oh, you did have a number of objections, Mr. Farkash, albeit informal, or let's call it spontaneous ones. However, do you want to cross-examine the witness?
Actually, no, Your Honor. Not at this time.
And you still have your closing, where you may propose to impeach the witness on relevance.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Which brings us to our last witness, Your Honor, the defendant, Anthony Kyle. We would like to call Mr. Kyle, but we don't want to compel him to testify. Mr. Kyle, do you agree to testify? You may also be questioned by the prosecution. In addition, you may request a final statement. Mr. Kyle, you have heard quite a few people talk about you, describe what they said they saw, and now we'd like to hear from you. I would like to encourage and to warn you, you are the most critical witness. No one else can communicate your motives, your, let's call it what makes you tick, as well as you. No one can help your case as much as you, and no one can harm your case as badly as you. But don't let this intimidate you. As you just said, you have nothing to hide.
Where to start? Mr. Kyle, can you tell us why you chose the Secret Service as your profession?
It's a long story in a way, but it's a short one also. You see, after I joined the service and did a couple of tours under Delta in the Middle East, I wanted to use my extensive training, and I can't even tell you how extreme that is. It can be, and use it in a more civil context. I felt the incessant crisis mode in a unit like Delta would turn me into someone I didn't want to be. I'm not saying that I would change every one of them, but in my case I found myself feeling and thinking things I didn't like. Nothing morally or ethically wrong, but just not something I wanted to inhabit my mind and my soul, if you will.
Okay. And then what specifically attracted you to the Secret Service?
Maybe that I could be around a familiar kind of people and maintain my skill level and still sleep in my own bed at night. Some people criticize me for that.
Some might. And then, you have done this for now, how many years?
About a little more than 20.
Okay. After 20-some years and at the top level of what you can be there, isn't there some degree of what now feeling creeping in?
An interesting question, and one I have encountered quite a few times. People ask that question of themselves or come to me as a senior officer and raise that question, but there is never a simple answer. What I tell people is to look back to dreams or ambitions they had before they joined any branch of the service. But then you also have to ask if you were running to the service because you were running away from something else, and that comes up and needs to be addressed. It was the same with me. I wanted to study law, and after all these years, that's still what I want to do. Help people who come out of the service and fall between the cracks and have nobody to help them. I mean, someone who knows where they come from and doesn't immediately construct a nonprofit around that. A person, not an institution. They've had enough of that by that time.
So is that where you're studying law again recently comes in? Okay, then maybe we should address how come you were assigned to the President of the United States. Aren't there countless other possible assignments for a secret agent, like a special agent like you?
Well, that's true. That at some point you qualify, and if there's an opening, and you get a chance to ask for that assignment.
And you
Yes,
did.
ma'am.
And what attracted you to that particular assignment? You could have asked for a vice presidential assignment, and you would have slept in your own bed as much, if not
If you
more.
really want to know, it wasn't a preference initially, or some excited rah-rah-rah about being close to the president. It was just the first one of those that came up, and I stayed with it.
And how long ago was
Roughly
that?
2014.
Forgive me, I have to ask you that. When it became clear in late 2016 that you would have to be on duty around the newly elected president-elect for whatever how many years, how did that?
It was more curious than anything else. You see, the assignment is not always in close quarters, but can also be related to vehicles, to peripheral crowd issues, to aircraft, all kinds of aspects. So there wasn't necessarily that much that would change.
Okay, but it did bring the law studies back into focus, did it not?
Probably yes. But more because I learned more and more about a need for what I had wanted to do than because I wanted out or to advance myself.
Speaking of your off-duty law studies, would you like to address Mr. Dudley's testimony about you in that
Should I
context?
be honest? The answer would be no.
So,
I think it's time to turn to the day of the incident. This is also a subject extensively covered by other people, not to mention media footage and replays and pontifications of all sorts. However, no one can tell us your experience. An experience which is critical for us to understand how things unfolded, how your decisions came about and all that. It is critical for us.
It was a routine assignment. A bit short notice, but then all of it is a bit short notice. Its readiness is what it boils down to, and a kind of relay system of seamlessly handing over the security interest from one entity to the other.
so from when on were you on?
I guess first thing he arrived at the scene, securing periphery, checking vehicles, setting up boundaries, all standard. It was a surprisingly easy job that day because there were no crowds to control, stragglers maybe, but no crowds. The city police takes care of the other streets, side streets, etc. So it was just a holding pattern, one set of upstairs offices, elevators, and penthouses. I was part of the outside at the time, holding pattern, as I said. The objective in this job is always to give the subject as much space as possible, but leave no unsecured gaps. This is why we stayed far on the outside, except for the media check, until we got the signal he was coming down and to move in closer, which at the time was still 50 more feet away.
What happened next?
What happened next, in a way, was what didn't happen. There was a vacuum of sorts. people came out of the building and they looked at first like they were not really connected to the president and his visit. We mostly knew who they were, like the professor over there or Mr. McBride, but they moved more or less toward the periphery, which is why we didn't focus on them much. Then he came out of the building with only a couple of us following, barely, and he looked lost. And because we had not received a plan, we didn't know either. And since we act based on if in doubt, don't, and there were no crowds, we left the space open. But we were ready. And that's when the first strange thing happened. The president seemed aimless, looked here and there, talked in different directions. We didn't hear exactly what he said despite our earpiece. Then he groped in his left inner coat pocket as if he was looking for a manuscript. Never seen him do that before either. And then, which caught us off guard because of the groping in the inner pocket, just before that he pulled that old pistol out of his right outside pocket. Nothing stays the same when you are looking at a weapon. But we were off again because of what looked like a toy gun-like shooting, and by that time in our experience with him, there was nothing that we could call unusual anymore. Another assessment problem. But we told each other to be ready. I had my hand at the holster.
Does this mean safety on or off, Mr. Kyle?
No safety, counsel. No service weapons have manual safety. And that's when he apparently had fumbled the safety on his pistol off, turned around and shot at Mr. Korngold. Luckily nothing happened then, but we had to move in ever so slowly, pistols drawn with both hands raised, and tried to make contact like a kind of moonwalk. The next few seconds are so complicated to tell, because you almost lose track of the shots, where they went and so on, and imagine it like a 1, 2, 3. 1 at the people in front of the building, but he apparently aimed too high. 2 at Mr. McBride, but he didn't hit either. And then he zeroed in on the press and shot Mr. Mattler. Killed him instantly. At that point, there was no more discretion about whether or not to move in quick and target it. And me being the most senior on the scene, I moved in first and spoke to him most directly. "Put the gun down, sir." I said that several times, and more direct as a command, but he did not react. Totally non-approachable. Instead, he shot at me. I felt pain shoot all the way through my left side and couldn't keep myself on my feet anymore, but I had my weapon drawn and raised, and in falling, I shot. We are trained not to lose our target even when we are moving or falling. That was the shot that ended it. Ended it. Things started turning then. Became different layers, turning different directions. Then I remember hearing an ambulance siren far away. I guess I was inside the ambulance.
Mr. Kyle? Anthony?
Okay. I'm okay. I just sometimes feel like too much. Way too much.
We have now heard the closing arguments of both the government and the defense. Both were very concise and respectful, and I must say I appreciate that.
Your Honor, as you previously stated, you would allow our client to deliver a final statement We have asked him, and he wishes to do so. It's rough after what he just went through, but he said he's willing to do that.
Mr. Kyle, are you ready?
I'm no longer a witness, am I? I'm now the accused, giving his closing statement, right?
Yes, Mr. Kyle. Go ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have never done this, so please forgive me if I fall outside of what is expected of me here. First, I want to thank you for sitting through this with all of us, with me especially. If anything in my life was a turning point, this represents a turning point. As to the nation and the world, I feel it would be grandiose of me to claim the same, but for you, listening to all that you have listened to, you in fact did carry the momentous nature of what changed in that moment. To determine, to find, to come to a unanimous decision among you if I'm guilty of murder. That decision is surely not made easier by the circumstances of the events. And you deserve even more appreciation for staying on course. Now about me. As was said about me, I have been in the service for more than 2.5 decades. I have sworn to lay my life down to protect it and everything that makes it what it is. This includes the office of the presidency. As Tim Meyers said earlier, his oath is my oath, too. And my oath is his. The same applies to the oath a president takes when he or she takes office. We are all bound by the same Constitution. You must understand that for a person who is bound by one oath to separate from another person who has sworn essentially the same oath is like ripping apart Siamese twins. In fact, it is as if one of the Siamese twins were ripping the other one away from himself. You must understand that. It is absolutely, totally unthinkable. Knowing that about us, the Secret Service people, and how we are wired, you may get an inkling about what an impossible, unthinkable thing happened that day. Unthinkable. It will probably take me the rest of my life to come to grips with the reality of this. Like I'm still inside that ambulance, and the world and what happened still feel and sound far away, muffled. Like I've fallen asleep in a movie, and I can't fully wake up. For someone like me, who is wired to the bone, down to every cell of my body to serve in the way we are trained to do, with which nothing is wrong, nothing. This is literally like an out-of-body experience. I need to come back, but it will take time. Now to address the charges against me: murder in the first degree, premeditated and perpetrated with an intent to kill, or murder in the second degree, an action taken with the intent to take the life of another, anyone. I can't give you any argument that hasn't been made before. I feel that I am the strongest argument for my innocence. Should you decide to find me guilty, I will accept that. If only because such a verdict will not change me. Should you find me not guilty, I believe you are courageously carrying the weight of the unfathomable events with me instead of unburdening yourself by casting a convenient blame. I think this is all. Please let me have this. We're reaching the end of this trial, and you, the jury, will come to a verdict. But an end it is not. Or maybe I should say, please, I beg you, please don't let it be an end. It must be a beginning.
The clerk. All rise. Everyone rises except for the judge. The 12 members of the jury file in. Some somber, some clumsily. None of them look up and out, let alone toward the accused. The clerk. Be seated.
Members of the jury, have you reached a verdict?
Yes, Your Honor, we have.
No one looks at the jury, and members of the jury look at no one. Only the judge looks at the jury foreperson, merely nods at her into the silence. The jury foreperson takes a half-sized piece of paper and begins reading.
On the charge of murder in the first degree, we, the jury, have found the defendant, Anthony Kyle, not guilty. On the charge of murder in the second degree, we, the jury, have found the defendant, Anthony Kyle, not guilty.